Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's chess channel and welcome to the Magnus Carlsen Invitational Tournament in 2021. Today with another great game from the round 15, so it was the last round of the preliminaries. It was a game played by Jan Nepomniachtchi against Alan Pichot. This was an incredible game, as I think that Jan Nepomniachtchi was a little bit playing for the audience. He moved up to the quarterfinal stage even before the last round. In the quarterfinals, we'll have the battle between Magnus Carlsen, Anish, Giri, Vasily So, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Hikaru, Nakamura, Sergey, Karjakin, Alireza, Firouzja, and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave are battling now in the quarterfinal stage. It's then a knockout stage. I think we'll see again great games and great performance by all of them, but of course only one can win. And let's check out now this game between Nepo and Alan Pichot. It was really incredible game. It had really some beautiful tactical elements. So here Jan Nepomniachtchi opened with the move e4. Alan Pichot responded with c5, the Sicilian, knight to f3, e6, the French Sicilian or the Polson Sicilian. We have d4, c takes d, knight to d4, and now knight to c6, knight to c3, the three knights variation of the Sicilian, of the French Sicilian, and now queen to c7. The idea of this move is of course to play a6, and then occupying of course the dark course with bishop to d6. Mikhail Tal used to play very often this line. It's a very aggressive line. Knight to b5 immediately doesn't bring you so much. Black will bring simply the queen to b8, and you don't have the opportunity to occupy the d6 square. It's a long-term weakness of course for black, but so far you cannot occupy it immediately. So here in the game, bishop to e3 played by Nepomniachtchi, and he didn't challenge of course the queen. He waited a little bit, and we have now the common move a6 with preparations to play the move b5 if white of course castles queenside. Sometimes in an early stage it's very risky to play this move b5. You would be vulnerable to some knight to b5, knight to b5, knight to d6, or knight to c7 ideas, so you have to be careful. You have to always calculate if it's possible maybe for white to sacrifice one of these knights if you advance the pawn on b5, at least in an early stage of the game. They consider these moves. Sometimes you'll see that top grandmasters are sacrificing these knights around the square b5. So it's sometimes possible, it's sometimes not. But as I said, at least consider the option of these moves in an early stage of the game. So here queen to f3. It's a fast developing style here by Jan Nepomniachtchi, preparing immediately queenside castle without further pushing the pawns. I think it's a very nice idea. And here comes knight to e5 by Pichot, and we have now queen to g3, pinning a little bit the queen, and the main goal now in some occasions is also to play the move bishop to d6. So far it's not possible. If you play this move bishop to d6 immediately, then you have some trouble with some f4 moves and then also with some e5 moves. So far exploiting the bishop wouldn't be a good idea. Here knight to e5, queen to g3, and now comes this move b5 because the queen is now far away from the action. This b5 move is perfectly fine, and now Jan Nepomniachtchi goes queenside castle. So okay, maybe one of the best ways here for black is to proceed with simply with the move b4. The white would be forced then to play the move knight to f4, and then the game becomes, I think, a little bit also complicated for white. d6, bishop to e7 could be an opportunity. Attacking this knight, you are forced a little bit to play the move b3, which you don't play actually sometimes, which you don't play so many times. I think you don't want to weaken the pawn structure in front of the king so much. So that's why I think maybe b4 slightly better continuation for black. But here in the game, instead of this b4 move, Pichot played simply knight to f6. Still fast development also by black. In the game now, f4 by Jan Nepomniachtchi challenging the knight, and we have now knight to g4. Here bishop to d2. Many times you see bishop to g1 as the main line. It's a much better continuation, I think, for white. And Hikaru Nakamura also played this line in one of these games in this tournament. Bishop to g1 probably better, but here Jan Nepomniachtchi decided to spice things up a little bit. He played now the move bishop to d2, and now comes the move b4. Now knight to a4, again with similar ideas, and now h5. But because what we want to do is of course take out this pawn on e4. That's the main weakness, I think, in white's position. So that's why here Alan Pichot defends this knight. Then he could, of course, take out this pawn with knight to e4, and the knight on g4 would be protected. So here bishop to d3, protecting this pawn. We have now d5. expanding in the center. If you try e takes d5, then I think black will cement the position. Black would have, I think, a comfortable game. Knight to d5 with opportunities to play bishop to b7, bishop to e7, and even kingside castling would be a possibility. White still on the other hand would be vulnerable to some attacks against this weak f4 pawn. Bishop to d6 maybe as a long-term idea could also work. Maybe f5, even h4. So as I said, you don't want to take out this pawn on d5 here in the game. Jan Nepomniachtchi closed the center with the move e5, and now comes knight to e4, bishop to e4, d takes e4. And okay, black has of course the advantage of the bishop pair. White doesn't have anymore the bishop pair. What black has of course as a weakness is this isolated pawn on e4. Still, this pawn can be protected with bishop to b7. Then maybe if somehow maybe this long diagonal opens, this mobile pawn would be also very dangerous. So with e3, maybe some discovered attacks with the bishop on b7. And here Nepomniachtchi simply pushed the pawn on h3, kicked away the knight, knight to h6, and now queen to b3. And from this point on, the game becomes really complicated, as here really Nepo decided to spice things up. So better idea, or maybe a more calm idea, would be the move b3, because the main threat now is the move bishop to d7, but still then you would have this square for the knight. Knight to b2 would be an opportunity now after something like bishop to c5, bishop to e3, but it leads, I think, into more drawish line. Knight to f5, queen to e1, and now maybe even to take out this bishop to c6, kingside castling, maybe securing the king and similar stuff. So I think this line is more and more simplified. It's a good line for both sides, but as I said, here Nepo doesn't want to play calm lines. He played now a very aggressive line, queen to b3. What's the issue about this move queen to b3? First of all, we want to attack here the weak b4 pawn. The problem is now if white defends this pawn with a5, then this knight on b5 could be also very dangerous. Then we could occupy the weak square on d6. That's the main issue. You cannot advance the pawns anymore. You have to protect these pawns in different ways. And here in the game, bishop to d7 now, this idea by Pichot. What he's doing here, he's leaving now the pawn hanging with the opportunity to, of course, play the move rook to b8. But actually, that's what Jan Nepomniachtchi wanted to happen, because here he prepared really a beautiful queen sacrifice. As I said in the middle of this video, bishop to g1 leads, I think, instead of this bishop to d1, into a more calm line for both sides. But I think this is something that Jan Nepomniachtchi has prepared at home, or something he has this ideas, I think, somewhere written down in some notebooks. Here, after the move rook to b8, here Nepomniachtchi plays a very beautiful queen sacrifice, and the evaluation is about equal. But I think from this point on, it's very hard for black to continue, because this bishop is very dangerous. In the game here, rook takes b3, of course, played by Pichot, and now we have bishop to d6. This is a very important move, an intermediate attack against the queen. Queen to a5, we have a takes b3, bishop takes a4, b takes a4, and now queen to a4. Pretty much everything is forced, but the problem is now that this bishop is cutting off the potential escape by the king, the potential kingside castling of blacks, and that's the main issue of this position here. First, Nepo retreats with the bishop, which is a good choice, because you don't want to have your bishop on d6, then you don't have anymore the d file open. What he wants to do is now activate somehow both of these rooks, and maybe threaten even some checkmate threats on d8, then followed with rook to e8, rook to d7. So this would be very dangerous for black. So that's why here king to d7, and it's actually not a mistake here by Pichot. It's actually the best move that you have to play. If you play something like knight to f5, you see now the problems. Knight to f5, e takes f5, now rook to d5. You can maybe play e3, maybe to counterattack, but the problem is now this move, rook to d1. That's something that always bothers, I think, black in this position. Rook to d8 followed with rook to d7, and you cannot do anything about this anymore. You're getting probably checkmated even with both of these rooks. You cannot escape with the rook somewhere else, so it's really a bad position. So after the move bishop to a3, king to d7, The good thing for black here is that white doesn't have good discovered attacks. You can maybe try knight to f5, we'll simply move, knight takes h6, and we can simply take out with the rook, and everything is glued together, everything is perfectly fine. So no really good discovered attacks for white are possible. So here, rook from h to e1, attacking now finally this weakness, the weak e4 pawn. King to c8, again Pichot plays a good move, and now rook to e4. You cannot hang on to this pawn. Rook to d8, and now rook to d3. What Nepomniachtchi is doing here, he wants of course to play a discovered attack. What he wants to do is somehow maybe liberate his knight, and then the queen would be endangered. The main threat now is the move knight to e6 followed with rook to d8. But the problem is now the only good move for black is actually the move rook to d5. Now, in the potential continuation, maybe you could try rook to c3, king to b7, and now maybe you could try this perpetual, rook to c7. The problem is now you cannot move, you cannot take the king, the rook with the king, because you get simply here knight to e6, and that's the main issue. You get a check and you lose the queen. So you would be forced to play simply perpetual, king to b6, then king to b7, and similar stuff. So it would lead probably into a perpetual check, into a drawish position. So, but after the move rook to d3, here Alain Pichot plays a huge blunder, knight to f5, and you can pause the video and try to see now the best next move here for white. It's a great move that Nepomniachtchi found. It's a monstrous move. Okay, I hope you could find this move, because it's knight to e6, great move, discovered attack against the queen. If you take out here the rook, then you get rook takes d8, and the problem is now you don't have good squares. You have only one square, it's the square b7, and then you get the fork on c5, knight to c5, and you lose the queen. So really wild stuff. Whatever you do after the move knight to e6, you cannot protect anymore this position. The queen is hanging, the rook is hanging, and in this position Alain Pichot decided to resign. So beautiful game, beautiful tactics, but as I said, here I think Nepo was playing a little bit for the audience, tried to sacrifice something. It was also a beautiful game from this tournament. Now, as I said, we're moving up to the quarterfinal stage. This will be very dynamic. I think we'll see really beautiful games. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my coverage so far. Here are some games that I've covered recently on my YouTube channel, and if you want to see maybe more attacking brilliances like this, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.